Hey, it's Sandra. Welcome to another episode of Asexualise, My Asexual Life. This is the place to be for education about asexuality, so subscribe and hit the bell icon right now. Happy Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month for day 13, celebrating our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. So, have you ever wondered what age people are when they discover they're asexual? Like, when was that time in their life that they found out, yes, I'm asexual? Let's dive into Asexual Perspectives book, which is available on Amazon, and see what different asexual perspectives have to say. So this is C.A. Altman's story. If you've got the book, page 91 in the printed edition, if you're reading along at home. So C.A. Altman's story, they discovered they're asexual about 2 years ago. So this book was published in 2017. So that would have been 2015 when I was 20. I didn't really have an idea of just what that meant for me until recently, though. So yeah, some people, I think, hear of the term asexual, apply it to them, and they don't fully realize what it's all about. There's people who may hear the term asexual and don't think it applies to them and don't dive into it, or there may be people who don't really fully understand the extent of their asexuality until they have more experiences in their life. So, Victoria's story. When did you first discover you're asexual? I first discovered I was asexual the night someone told me that I might be. I was 18 at the time. And so I think this is very interesting because someone told Victoria that they are asexual. One is, you shouldn't really tell someone they are something. It's up to the person to decide for themselves whether they are that or not. But I do think it's good that someone else had heard of asexuality and told Victoria that basically she was asexual, or they were, or he was, depending on what gender Victoria is. Because I don't know, because I did the stories via email. So a lot of email correspondence. So yeah, so the person can also, I say in the beginning of this book as well, some people use an alias as well for their particular story. So yeah, let's move on now to someone else's story. Adelaide's. When did you first discover you are asexual? I can't really define a time when I first discovered I'm asexual. Throughout high school, I was never really interested in having a relationship with anyone. I would fake having crushes on people, and I figured everyone was faking and it was considered cool to have a crush on someone. In about 11th grade, I figured out everyone else wasn't faking. Even though I had sort of realized then that I was different, I didn't have the word asexual in my vocabulary. I spent hours agonizing over what box to put myself in. I didn't like boys in that way, so did that mean I was a lesbian? But I also didn't like girls in that way. Did that mean I liked them both equally? So was I bisexual? None of those labels really seemed to fit. So, as I previously mentioned in another video, some people like labels and some people don't. I personally think labels are useful in terms of they help us understand ourselves and other people to understand us, but some people don't feel that way. However, I don't think you should label yourself just because someone else wants you to, or someone else doesn't understand you. You should only apply a label to yourself if you want to, and if you understand yourself. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. What's the most important thing is what you know about yourself, and you can just make up a label of what you are. Like, I love my asexual label. It seems weird calling it a label because really it's an identity. It's not a label. I don't Labels are used to identify things, right? But with the asexual community, lots of people talk about the word labels, but you don't hear heterosexuals going, I labeled myself a heterosexual. You'd hear them just say, my sexual orientation is straight. That's all you'd hear them say. So it seems kind of weird to me that asexuals do talk about labels as in labels rather than say that how I identify myself. I use the word label because that's what most people end up talking about, and this is brought up in this conversation. And also on Instagram, I saw someone post about labels. Do we always need them? But loads of people have labels. Like, if you're a certain religion, like the word religion is a label, the word ethnicity is a label, the word gender's a label, the word gamer is a label, the word vegan's a label, the word vegetarian's a label. You can't get away from labels. But homeowners are label, renters are label, everything is labeled because that's how it's categorized. So when people say, oh, like, I don't label myself, I'm thinking, well, maybe you're not labeling your identity as an asexual person, but I'm sure you're labeling yourself in other ways. Do you know what I mean? I just think most people do have some labels in their life because that's how we function as a society and world, by categorizing things in order to differentiate ourselves, in order to understand what's where, and in order to recognize communities. I mean, if we didn't even label ourselves asexual, then how would we find other people like us? Do you know what I mean? I don't think labels are a bad thing, but I think the word label is a bit weird for a sexual orientation identity. Like, I identify as a heteromantic asexual. That's my quick label for most people who want to hear it. But if I want to use my full identity, it's a heteromantic, hyperromantic, grey asexual, younger cougar who doesn't like sex, just kissing. And I'm not a textbook grey A because I don't experience any sexual attraction whatsoever. I just have grey areas with the way I like to kiss and have some sexual behavior, but zero sexual attraction. You know what I mean? If you want to know how I fully identify, but I just stick to asexual, heteromantic most of the time, hyperromantic, because it's easier for people to understand that. Well, most people probably don't even understand hyperromantic. They probably think, oh, hyperromantic means you're really hyperromantic, as in you're excessively romantic. I guess they might get that. But if I start throwing in the mix a hyper kisser, people don't probably understand that because most people are not hyper kissers. And most people don't use the term hyper-romantic. They would use like, oh, I'm such a romantic. I'm a romantic at heart. I'm soppy, or I'm like, I don't know what the words are, but I've heard them say stuff about being a romantic. But I'm a hyper kisser, and I've not heard of anyone else describe themselves as a hyper kisser before. Hypersexual, yeah, which I'm not, but not a hyper kisser. So being a hyper kisser, I might be asexual equivalent of a hypersexual, I guess, but with kissing without sex, if that makes sense. So, David's story. When did you first discover you are asexual? It's different. Sorry, I'll speak that again. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly. I am quite sure in saying that by the age of 13, I remember having no interest in sex and feeling that it wasn't a phase or something I would grow out of. So we just heard someone else's story where they were saying that they thought everyone else was faking crushes and things, so they just kind of went along with it. And then David said he thought it was a phrase. I know of David, so I know the gender, unless he has changed his gender now. So yeah, so David thought that this is a phase that they would grow out of. And I don't usually hear asexuals say that. I usually hear other people say that about asexuals. Oh, it's just a phase you're growing through, so you'll grow out of it. And I absolutely hate that, because it's like, well, why aren't we saying this heterosexuals? Oh, you're just heterosexual for a few years or whatever of your life because you've hit puberty, all your hormones are everywhere. So you're just like heterosexual for the puberty years and then you're not anymore. Like, why is it that everyone picks on asexuals to like think it's a phase they're going through and they don't know their own minds? It's very patronizing, I find. And then if we go back to Adelaide's story, when Adelaide said I would fake having crushes on people, and I figured everyone was faking as it's considered cool to have a crush on someone, and then they figured out in 11th grade that everyone else wasn't faking. So I think this is quite a relatable asexual type of experience. that when we're in school or college, for example, primary school, secondary school, college, depending on what your education system's like there, you hear people talking about sex and you hear people talking about sexual acts and sexual things, and they make sexual jokes and they start talking about getting to different bases and getting off with each other and the stuff they've done with each other, and you're like thinking, okay, why is this the be all and end all of life? What's so important about and special? You know what I mean? So I think, you just have to give yourself time to find out what sexual orientation you are. You don't necessarily have to adopt what other people think you are. You should decide who you think you are. So years and years ago, before I discovered I'm asexual in 2014, I had someone, I've shared this before, but not that often on this channel. There was someone I had as a blogger friend, if you like. So I met them through blogging and they were my Facebook friend for a while. And they did a blog, which was an educational blog, which talked about sex, but it was from an educational point of view. And when I was leaving a comment on one of their blog posts, they said, "Oh, sounds like you're asexual." And I didn't look the term up. I hated the word because it had the word sexual in it. And I said, "No, I just like kissing and I don't associate sex with love." And that was it. I didn't think to look it up. I hated the word. I didn't want to get involved with it. That was my knee-jerk reaction. That was it. And then in 2014, when I went to see a counsellor, because the expectation of sex at the end of a date with a heterosexual guy was making me almost wet myself because I was so nervous because I knew I didn't want sex. I told her this and I said that I'm really worried because I like kissing. I don't like sex. I'm hugely romantic, but this is what's happening at the end of a night of a date with a heterosexual guy. And she said the worst thing she could have possibly said. You're going to have sex if you want to keep a good guy. I was absolutely horrified. To me, that's sexual abuse and like giving a guy a license to rape me. It's disgusting. Why should I do something I don't want to do in order to feel loved, in order to have a good guy? He's not going to be a good guy for me if he's pushing me to do something I don't want to do. And the only way I can get love from him is if I do that thing. It's just horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I was horrified. And that's when I went home and Googled, I love kissing, not sex. And it came up with asexuality.org, which is the biggest online forum for asexuals. And I read some of the forum threads there and discovered there are other people like me who wanted a romantic relationship without sex. And I was so relieved. I was so relieved. And I'm just like, thank God there's other people in the world like me. And I could say the rest they say is history because here I am now helping you asexuals. So that was in 2014. I started this channel in 2015. So yeah, I'm so glad I found out I'm asexual because here I am with you. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. So let's crack on with some more people. 5 Mark 2 end story. I found out I'm asexual on the 15th of January 2015 when I was 21 years old. However, I somewhat knew and found it a little funny actually that I wasn't as interested in sex growing up while others at least made themselves out to be. Yeah, a lot of the time you don't know who's really interested in sex or who's not because it's seen as a cool thing to talk about sex. So some people who talk about sex might not be into it. They're just bragging about it or talking about it because they think that's what they're supposed to do. Do you know what I mean? And so I wonder how many people are, thank you for the hearts. I wonder how many people are in that same boat. You know what I mean? You should never have to be something you're not. You know? And I'm sending you so much love right now. Thank you for the hearts. Darcy's story. When did you first discover you're asexual? I have always known something was a little different when it came to sex with me. As a little kid, I had so many crushes, like most kids do, but as I matured, I was always stuck in crush mode. I liked some people, but I never really thought things past kissing. Sexuality had never offended me, but I was always uncomfortable when it came to including my own body. I didn't realize until I was about 25 that there was a name for what it was, and it was just normal. There you go. Asexuality is normal for some people. And I do agree, with that. There's a lot of people that try and say asexuality is not normal, but it is normal for some people to be asexual and not want, like, or need partner sexual intercourse. It's very normal. There's nothing strange or weird about it. It's just right for some people. It fits. It's comfortable. It's great. I think it's a special gift, actually, to be able to see the world in a completely different way to the majority of the population. We get to see people's personalities more. We get to see their aura more. We get to explore other aspects of a relationship and connection because genitalia is not involved, or we don't predominantly focus on that, I have never had a crush, by the way. As a hyperromantic, heteroromantic asexual, I've never had a crush in my life. I don't actually know what a crush feels like. I've gone from fancy mode. This is when I was like 15 years old. I fancied the boyfriend I had. I wasn't in love with him. I didn't love him. I knew that at 15. I was fancying him, but not loving him. And then the first guy I ever thought I loved was my boyfriend at 16 years old, but I wasn't 100% sure if I loved him or not. And then the first long-term boyfriend I got at 17 years old, that was the first guy I actually fully knew that I loved. And so that's kind of strange. I can remember those things. I can remember the stages going from fancy to I think I love you, I'm not 100% sure, to I really love you in different relationships. And now I tend to not have the other feelings of fancy. If I get feelings for a guy, it's romantic feelings, and a lot of the time it goes straight to either love feelings or full blown love if I'm actually in a relationship, and it's really hard, that part. I go from I don't experience any platonic attraction whatsoever, so it skips the platonic attraction bit out. So I often get feelings for a guy. Victor, hello, nice to see you. Is that a little heart I see? It's very cute. My nose is itching for some reason. I think that means spiritually I'm going to get a surprise. It's very sweet. I love the little heart thing. It's so cute. You're talking to my hyper romantic, so of course I'm liking the heart thing. Yeah, so I've never had a crush in my life. I don't know what a crush feels like. I usually think that most who are aromantic asexuals, if they get any attraction, it's usually a crush. That's what I've known people who are on the aromantic spectrum. They might not be fully aromantic. They might be grey romantic, for example. A grey romantic is someone who experiences romantic attraction, but only infrequently or not enough to want to act on it, and under limited circumstances. So that's a grey romantic. So a grey romantic is part of the aromantic spectrum, but it's not a pure aromantic, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I've heard some aromantics say about crushes. I think it's difficult from what I hear because people can have crushes on people for years, like pop stars and actors and singers and stuff like that. So, Juanita Redmond's story. When did you first discover you are asexual? I think I've only just discovered it now. I have always not hugely been into sex, even with long-term stable relationships. I just thought that maybe I wasn't in love with my partner enough. I have been single over the last year, and on trying to re-enter the dating scene, I've realized that other single people view sex with excitement, and I view it as a threat and with vulnerability and fear. And one day I thought maybe I'm asexual. Maybe sex is just not my thing. Maybe I should go and join the monastery or go and meditate with the monks. I'm laughing because I'm laughing because I think it's funny coming from an asexual, because I've actually had that said to me about, oh, you're like a monk then. And I find that actually insulting, because I'm like, of course I'm not like a monk. Oh my gosh, just because I don't want sex doesn't mean to say it's not normal. But I do want to pick up on some points here. And going back to the previous person's story of when they were saying that they didn't really think about sex. They didn't think past kissing in a relationship when they were in their teens and younger years. I was exactly the same. Like, I still am really. And, when I was in my teens at school, like secondary school, I, for example, knew I liked a guy who was a bit older than me, and I used to just walk near his home because he lived near my grandma, but I didn't know the exact house he lived in. So I used to walk near his area in case I would like bump into him. There was a shop there that I could go to, so it was kind of an excuse. And I also knew someone else who lived round the corner from well, not exactly specifically round the corner, a little bit further afield, but I knew someone who lived near the shop. And I knew he lived around there. So I would like go down to the shop and I would just like think about this guy and think, oh, I wish I could just see him now and hold his hand and maybe do some kissing, but definitely hold his hand. And for me, it was all about romanticism. It was all about being romantic. It was all about kissing and cuddling and holding hands. I never thought about sex. It didn't enter my head. I wasn't interested in it. It didn't enter my head that I'd ever be doing that in a relationship with someone in the future. I didn't think that way. And I think this is a huge sign you're asexual. If you've had those thoughts and feelings throughout a lot of your life, like looking back at school or college or even uni, and you're like, I'm just really not into sex, but I love romance, I love kissing, I love cuddling, but I just like sex just is myrrh to me, or I'm really disinterested in it. It's not my thing. You're strongly likely to be on the asexual spectrum if you're thinking and feeling that way. And like this person said, Juanita said, I've realized that other single people view sex with excitement. They're talking about when they re-entered the dating scene. And I would say that's very true. When I've been on dating sites, like predominantly heterosexual dating sites, I forget that people are so into sex. And when guys talk to me, it's just like mind blowing. It's like going back into a different land. It's like being an alien in the same world. It's like an asexual world and a heterosexual world are two completely different things, but in the same planet, if you like, both on planet Earth. But it's so weird. I'm not actively on dating sites anymore. I am on some dating sites still, but I'm not active on them anymore. And what I mean by that is I'm not actively going talking to anyone or seeking anyone. So Badoo, for example, I've still got a premium account. Occasionally I go in there just to make sure my account's live and get out again without doing anything, in and out. And I remember like being on that site, and remember when I was on Facebook dating, which I've completely deleted now. That was actually my favorite dating app, but all the 4 guys that I had dates with in person, well, I had a date with 3 guys in person. The last one I actually ended up in a relationship with, all of them were liars. So I'm like, although Facebook dating I liked as the most easiest app out of the dating apps for me, and the ones where I could get the most dates out of most easily and talk to a lot of Indian guys, for example, that was actually like really bad in terms of the fact that the guy's character was no good. They're all liars. I hate liars. I can't stand them. And it's just stupid lying. Without trust in a relationship, you've got nothing. And for them to not even realize that is ridiculous. But anyway, I'm glad I'm off that. But even on Badoo, like they're just like some of the guys are just such like vultures with sex. And because when you're asexual and you're not on the dating scene for a long time, you forget how people are so driven to sex because you just forget. Your normal day has not got usually thoughts of sex. It's not got activities involving sex. For me, I don't watch TV, so I'm not watching any TV programs with sex in it. I'm very careful about the movies I watch at the cinema, so usually they've got no sex in them, and what I watch on Disney Plus and stuff like that. So I'm limiting my exposure to sex all the time because I'm not interested in it. I'm not interested in seeing boobs and butts and things like that and genitalia. It doesn't interest me. Do you know what I mean? And so when you go back on the dating scene and I can feel the sexual energy through the messages, the drive for sex all the time. It's like, it's like having a dog on heat in the messages. I'm like, oh my Lord. And to go from not exposed to much to do with sex at all to having complete, like, unleashed control, if you like no control, unleashed access to yourself with heterosexual guys that are just really interested in sex. It's horrifying, really, because you're like, oh, I forgot most people see sex as a central thing to a relationship. And you just completely forget that because it's not central to your life. You don't even have it in your life a lot of the time if you're asexual, or if you're sex repulsed like me, you don't usually have it at all in your life, right? And when you just hear some of them talk and they start talking about sex stuff and you're like thinking, what the hell? Where did that come from? And then you're like, oh, I'm on a dating site. What do people do on dating sites? They hook up. What's hooking up? It means they just meet for sex. Oh my gosh. OMG. And you're just like, oh my lord, what have I gone back into? It's like being in a pool of crocodiles that are snapping. I want sex, I want sex. Rah, 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 rah. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my lord. This is how it feels, figuratively speaking, when you're a sex repulsed asexual. Not all asexuals are sex repulsed, right? I'm not saying that everyone has to hate sex. And I'm not saying sex is bad for everyone. I'm just saying when you're a sex repulsed asexual who hasn't exposed themselves to hardly anything to do with sex for a long, long time, and then you're exposed to it continuously through heterosexual guys on dating sites or whatever guy or gender you're into, it's just horrendous because you're like, this is going back to the dark ages or something. It's almost like you've stepped backwards into a time warp when people are sex obsessed. Because when you're no longer interested in sex, or when you've never been interested in sex, or when you've got to a stage in your life where you realize you don't have to be interested in sex, you were conditioned to believe that you wanted sex, you liked sex, you enjoyed it. When you didn't, if you didn't, some people do, obviously. And then when you get out of all that situation, you get out of all that conditioning, you realize you don't have to have sex, you don't have to like it, you don't have to enjoy it, you don't have to get on with it, you don't have to have it. It's literally like stepping back into the 1950s or some weird stuff. I don't know what 1950s are like because I was born way, way decades later than that. But what I'm trying to say is, it's just like, for me personally, it's like stepping into a time warp where you're going backwards. It's almost like asexuals are in the future when I think about it. It's almost like we're like, I was going to say we're like AIs, but we're not AIs. We're not artificial intelligence. We're very intelligent. But it's almost like we're the future. Like AI is the future. It's almost like we're the future because we can live without sex and the conditioning of sex and the addiction of sex that's crippling so many people's lives and so many people's minds because they're addicted to it. It controls them. It controls what they're thinking. It controls what they're watching. It controls what they're doing. It's very addictive, bad habit for some people, right? Some people. I'm not saying sex can't be good for some people. I'm not saying sex can't be enjoyable for some people. But I really think in the future it should be more of a case of, do we choose to have sex rather than, are we conditioned to think that sex is the be all and end all of a relationship, the healthiest part of a relationship, the most vital component of a relationship? I just think that that's way off the mark. I mean, more and more people are going to get artificial boyfriends and girlfriends and stuff like that, and partners. That's going to happen. I mean, obviously, already there's bots that are AI bots that people can have AI robotic girlfriends and boyfriends already. As there's like people creating, or at least know of one app that's created somewhere. I can't remember. I went to a training once and it said about the fact of what they're doing. You know, that you can chat to an AI bot, have them as your girlfriend, boyfriend. They're like a talk to them and everything else. But it will satisfy a need. It'll satisfy an emotional need that's actually lacking in the world. It'll satisfy the human connection need. It's really weird. We're the most connected we've ever been, yet a lot of people are actually disconnected. And they're going to use AI to fulfill that need. You know, I've used AI. And it is really good in some instances. I'm in Matthew Hussey's Love Life Club, and there's Matt AI in there. So it's really good. That's really helped me get over my relationship. My ex relationship, I should say. And you know what I mean? So there are good things about AI, but honestly, it's like stepping into a time warp. When you've advanced yourself and realised that you've been sold a lie all these years, that you weren't actually heterosexual at all, and heterosexual is something that people drum into everyone that you're meant to be, and everyone's supposed to like sex. When you realise that that's conditioning, and you're not necessarily that what you've been conditioned to be, it's like you've woken up to yourself. And if you get away from all the sex scene and you live happily without that, and you've got loads of good things going on in your life that you thoroughly enjoy without involving sex at all, when you go back on dating sites and you're around heterosexuals that are just so, the main focus of their life on a dating site is sex. They haven't really got anything else to offer that much. It's like they go to work, come home, watch TV and talk about sex. It's like, so boring. What are you doing to develop yourself and grow yourself? What's going on? But it literally is like stepping backwards. It's like you've elevated your life forwards. You realize that sex is a conditioned thing. Heterosexuality is a conditioned thing. It's something we're conditioned from birth to believe, the majority of us anyway, that we are. And when you've broken away from that condition and finally wake up to yourself, and then you go back on the dating scene where there's people still conditioned like zombies on there, I'm like, oh my God, it's like going backwards into a time warp. It's like, hang on a minute, I'm in the future, you're in the past. What's gone on? That's kind of how it feels right now. That's kind of how it feels to me anyway, when I think back to when I was on dating sites. I mean, I've only just come off them, like active off them. I've only just come off being actively on them since I split up with my ex. Well, since I actually got with my ex, I should say. But since I split with him, I got my premium Badoo account back, but I've not been active on there because I'm doing a dating detox, online dating detox, which is very good. Got my time back now. Time is precious. Use it to do things you enjoy, not what you're conditioned into believing you enjoy. So I would say find your own identity, be who you want to be who you're born to be, always stay ace. And I hope you've liked this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Happy Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month, celebrating our diversity across the asexual spectrum, our differences within it. Go and grab a copy of Asexual Perspectives on Amazon, and also Diary Confessions of a Hyperromantic Asexual. Both of these are best-selling books. If you're asexual, you'll love these books. Go and grab them, and I'll see you soon next video live stream. Lots of love. Thank you, Victor, for being in chat tonight. Thanks to everyone else for watching. Take care, and good morning, good afternoon, hello, good night, wherever you are. Love you lots. Take care. Bye.